I know I've experienced strange things as a ride-hailing driver, but nothing, absolutely nothing, compares to what happened that night. Imagine accepting a ride and instead of taking someone from one point to another, they simply hand you $500 in cash and drive you around the city, aimlessly, without explanation. Well, that's exactly what happened to me. When I saw that folded bill in my hand, I thought it was some kind of joke, a prank, or even a trap. But there was no hidden camera, no one laughing outside. It was just me and him in the car. And believe me, the feeling of driving aimlessly with someone mysterious in the back seat was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of my life. At first, it might seem easy to make money that way, but as the minutes passed, I began to realize there was much more to that ride than met the eye. My name is Daniel, and I live in Houston. I've been driving for a ride-hailing app for a little over 2 years, and in that time I've seen it all: overly talkative passengers, others who don't say a word, rides that end in good tips, and others that barely pay for gas. But that particular night, I was about to give up on the shift. I'd done a few short rides, nothing interesting, and I was even considering turning off the app and going home. It was already past 10, the city was still alive with its noise, and I just wanted to end the day without surprises. It was precisely at that moment, when my mood was already swinging between tiredness and impatience, that the call appeared on the screen. A ride not too far away, seemingly ordinary. I accepted without much thought, just to complete another trip and make up for the time spent on the road. Little did I know that that ringing on my phone would be the beginning of one of the most curious stories I'd ever have to tell. And look, if you enjoy hearing real and unexpected stories like this, take the opportunity to like and subscribe to the channel right now. That way you'll ensure you don't miss the outcome of this race that, believe me, had an unbelievable turnaround. When I arrived at the agreed-upon location, I confess I expected to find someone ordinary, perhaps a customer in a hurry or a group returning from a bar. But what I saw immediately intrigued me. The passenger was standing alone on the sidewalk and seemed completely out of place in the scene. He wore an impeccable suit, the kind that draws attention even from afar, and sunglasses at night. That would have been strange enough in itself, but the detail that made me most uncomfortable was the way he looked around. It wasn't a vacant stare. It was as if he were checking to see if anyone was following him. He seemed alert, aware of every movement on the street. When he opened the door and got in, he brought with him an air of mystery that immediately changed the atmosphere in the car. I wondered if I was picking up an executive, someone famous, or perhaps someone involved in something I'd rather not know about. The calm, almost calculated way he settled into the back seat made me realize this wasn't going to be just another ride. And from that moment on, every instinct in my mind told me I needed to pay attention to every detail. As soon as the car started moving, I expected the classic instructions from any passenger: the address on the GPS, perhaps a quick comment about the destination. But that wasn't what happened. Instead of looking ahead or checking his phone, the man pulled a wad of bills from his pocket, calmly counted them, and handed me exactly $500. I stood there blankly for a few seconds, staring at the money in my hand, unsure whether to accept it or ask what was happening. Then he said directly, almost coldly, "I just want you to drive, without stopping, without a destination." I confess that, at that moment, my heart raced. No one had ever asked me anything like that. I even thought it was some kind of trap or even a poorly planned prank. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw his serene face, but there was something in his eyes that didn't convey peace. That request made no sense at all. Who in their right mind would pay $500 in cash just to drive around the city? I questioned, trying to understand. I asked if he was sure, if he really didn't want to go anywhere. He just repeated, "Drive? That's all." The way he said it sounded more like an order than a request. My mind started racing. Was I about to get into trouble? Maybe someone was trying to mislead someone, or even worse, use the car for something illegal. On the other hand, I couldn't ignore that those $500 made a huge difference in my month. It was almost what I could earn in 2 or 3 days of work. And even with all my doubts, temptation prevailed. I took a deep breath, pocketed the money, and moved on. The city at night looked different. And suddenly, that race became a psychological game in which every second heightened my curiosity and, at the same time, my fear of what was to come. The moment I accepted the money and let the car drive down the avenue, a strange mixture took hold of me. On the outside, I tried to maintain my calm, as if this were just another unusual race. But on the inside, it was as if a siren was blaring, reminding me constantly that this made no sense. I had two very clear options: return the bills and end the race right there, or let curiosity and temptation guide me. And, unfortunately or not, it was the latter that prevailed. As I drove, I began to notice every detail. He settled into the back seat, put one leg over the other, and stared out, as if nothing existed but the lights passing by the window. The silence was almost deafening. No music, no conversation. Just the sound of the engine and the city. It was impossible not to think something was wrong. My mind raced in 1,000 directions. Was this a criminal fleeing from someone? Would I be accused of being an accomplice to something without even realizing it? At times, I considered stopping the car and simply returning the money. But with each corner we passed, the feeling grew stronger that I needed to find out where this would lead. It was like being in a movie, but one where I didn't know if I would be the protagonist or just the next victim. Meanwhile, his figure in the back seat remained impeccable. His suit undamaged, his sunglasses in the middle of the night, and his posture almost theatrical. It was as if he were acting something out, but at the same time, he conveyed a disturbing seriousness. I no longer knew if I was dealing with someone eccentric or someone in real danger. Deep down, I knew that money had me trapped in this situation. It was like an invisible chain. I could have turned around, but I was trapped by curiosity and the promise of that absurd tip. And so, torn between reason and greed, I kept driving, never imagining that the night would only get stranger from then on. The first few minutes of that ride were marked by an almost suffocating silence. I'd driven quiet passengers before, but this was different. Normally, when someone doesn't speak, there's still a naturalness. They're checking their phone, responding to messages, or simply relaxing during the ride. But not with him. The man remained motionless, simply staring out the window, as if every detail of the street was vitally important. Every now and then, I noticed in the rearview mirror that he'd glance back, quickly and discreetly, as if searching for something or someone. This immediately put me on alert. If anyone was following us, I couldn't tell, but the insistence with which he checked the side mirror and the corners created the sensation that we were in an invisible pursuit. The car continued on its course, and even though I tried to distract myself, each second of silence seemed to multiply. The sound of tires on asphalt, the engine revving, the wind gently tapping the windows, everything seemed amplified. I would even cough on purpose or adjust the radio just to break the awkward atmosphere, but nothing seemed to work. He didn't seem bothered, didn't react. It was as if I had a ghost in the back seat. A dapper ghost, in an expensive suit and sunglasses, but a ghost nonetheless. His presence filled the entire car, even without saying a word. And the worst part was that this lack of communication only fueled my imagination. I began to form hypotheses. Was he on the run? Was someone dangerous tracking us? Or had I just become the personal driver for a rich madman who liked to pay to play with other people's patience? At every turn, the tension seemed to rise. And the longer he remained silent, the more I wondered how long I could endure this atmosphere without exploding with questions. After a few minutes of aimless driving, he finally broke the silence, but not in the way I expected. Without looking at me, he simply pointed with his hand and said, "Turn right." I obeyed, thinking he'd finally decided where he wanted to go. But no. A few meters later, another command, "Now, turn left." And so began a strange sequence of instructions that led nowhere. He'd order me to turn onto random streets, circle blocks, repeat the same route 2-3 times. I felt like a rat trapped in a maze, spinning in circles without understanding the logic. The GPS on the dashboard was useless because there was no destination registered. The only guide was his voice, short and firm, determining each turn. With each new change of route, my suspicions grew. It was impossible not to wonder, is he trying to throw someone off the scent? Are we really being followed? At times, I even started checking my mirrors, looking for repeated headlights behind us, cars that seemed to appear more than once, motorcycles that slowed down when we slowed down. But try as I might, I couldn't identify anything concrete. What made me even more nervous was his calm. He didn't seem lost nor desperate. It was as if he knew exactly what he was doing. And that only made the situation more mysterious. Who had the power to pay a driver $500 and still drive all night as if on a secret mission? My head was spinning with 1,000 theories. Maybe it was a businessman running away from a date he didn't want to have. Maybe it was someone involved in shady dealings, trying to throw off enemies. Or perhaps it was just a rich eccentric with money to spare. The problem was that, as I tried to come up with explanations, the tension inside the car only grew, like a rope being stretched beyond its limit. And with every pointless turn, I felt like this rope was about to snap. After so many meaningless turns, I could no longer stand the silence and the feeling of being used as a pawn in a game I didn't understand. So, I took a deep breath and decided to try to strike up a conversation. I asked if he was looking for an address, if he needed help getting anywhere specific. He simply replied with a curt no, without even looking at me. I pressed on in a more relaxed tone, saying that people usually pay such high fares for long trips, not for driving around the city. This time he said yes, as if he just wanted to close the subject. That's when I realized it wouldn't be easy to get any information out of him. I tried a third approach, commenting on the evening's atmosphere, how Houston got busy after 10. Again, short answer. Yes. That was enough to make me realize I wasn't welcome in the conversation. Every word he uttered seemed calculated to maintain distance, as if he were building a wall between us. Deep down, I knew the normal thing would be to accept the money, drive, and keep quiet. But curiosity gnawed at me. I needed to know what this man was hiding. And even though I wasn't successful at first, my desire to unravel the mystery only grew. The atmosphere inside the car began to grow increasingly tense. With each corner he pointed out, the feeling that something was wrong only grew. His silence, mixed with those curt orders, made it seem like I was serving as a getaway driver, even though I didn't know who or what for. I no longer just looked ahead, my eyes darted to the rearview mirror, trying to spot any suspicious cars behind us. And the strangest thing was his behavior. The more time passed, the more nervous he seemed. His hands tapped lightly on his knees, his shoulders were rigid, and at times he would lean over to look out the back window, as if expecting someone to appear. I, of course, began to imagine everything. Had he stolen something? Was he running from the police? Or perhaps from someone even worse? My heart raced along with the car. It was impossible not to get carried away by the theories. The air felt heavy, as if every minute inside that car was an endurance test. I knew that at some point I would have to break this cycle and really ask what was going on, because the tension was already unbearable. There came a point when I simply couldn't contain my curiosity any longer. All that pent-up tension, his suspicious glances behind me, the unexplained changes of direction, it was too much. I needed an answer, any answer. So, without thinking much, I blurted out the question directly, almost harshly, "Are you running away from someone?" Instantly, the air inside the car seemed to freeze. He didn't respond immediately. He just slowly turned his face toward me, as if considering whether I deserved to know the truth or whether it was better to keep it a mystery. His silence, at that moment, was even more suffocating than before. My heart was pounding so loudly it seemed to fill the entire car. For a few seconds, I thought I'd made a huge mistake, that he might just order me to stop the car right there or, worse, react unpredictably. But instead, what I got was a strange smile. It wasn't one of relief or sympathy, it was a nervous smile, the kind that leaves more questions than answers. This small reaction only made me more intrigued. He didn't say yes or no. He just smiled and looked back out the window, as if my question had touched on something he'd rather hide. I, on the other hand, became even more certain that there was a much bigger story behind that race. After that enigmatic smile, silence fell again in the car. I was already bracing myself for no response when, suddenly, he sighed deeply as if carrying a heavy weight and said, "I'm not running away from anyone dangerous. I'm just running away from a date arranged by my parents." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. I'd spent the entire night dreaming up theories of stalking, crime, conspiracy, and the explanation was simply a family dinner? He noticed my confused expression in the rearview mirror and added, "They want me to meet the daughter of a friend of a couple. They think she'd be the perfect match for me, but I can't handle the pressure anymore." So, when I saw an escape, I did. I didn't know whether to laugh or breathe a sigh of relief. All the tension that had been building turned into surprise. This man, so mysterious, with his impeccable suit and calculated posture, was paying me $500 just to avoid an introductory dinner. It was at that moment that I realized, behind all the seriousness and enigmatic air, he was just another person trying to escape other people's expectations. And, in a way, that completely humanized the situation. When the revelation finally sank in, I couldn't help but laugh. I glanced in the rearview mirror and blurted out, almost without thinking, $500 just to avoid dinner? He gave a shy smile, as if he knew the situation was absurd, but at the same time, understandable. The tension that had been suffocating me minutes before suddenly broke. The uncomfortable silence transformed into a much lighter, almost comical atmosphere. I couldn't help but imagine the scene. A grown, successful man, dressed as if for an important meeting, paying a small fortune just to drive around town and escape a dinner table. I jokingly commented that if I were him, I would have pretended to be stuck in traffic or even made up a last-minute meeting. He laughed for the first time that night, and it was so genuine it felt like a huge weight had been lifted. For the first time, that enigmatic demeanor faded, giving way to an ordinary man trying to cope with a suffocating family situation. Deep down, I also felt relieved. At every turn, I'd imagined something dark, dangerous, even illegal. Discovering it was all just an escape from an arranged encounter was almost a gift. And the truth is, as strange as it was, there was a funny side to it all. After the laughter came the outburst. He finally took off his sunglasses, rested his elbows on his knees, and spoke in a different, more human, almost weary tone of voice. He said the pressure from his family was unbearable. That behind the expensive suit and serious demeanor lay someone who had always had to follow the script written by others, study what they told him to, work in the family business, keep up appearances at every social event. And now, even his love life was being treated as part of a contract. I listened in silence, and for the first time that night, I felt empathy for him. He wasn't just an eccentric paying a premium for a whim. He was someone trying to breathe on his own, even if only for a few hours. He said he felt suffocated, that freedom had become a luxury, and that paying $500 to wander aimlessly was, in a way, the simplest way he'd found to feel in control of his life. That got me thinking. How often do we feel trapped in situations we didn't choose, just to please others? I myself had stories of decisions I'd made under pressure, and there, driving aimlessly, I realized we were connected by something deeper than a strange rush. Deep down, he wasn't running away from a person. He was running away from a life he didn't want to live. We were in this lighter, almost complicit mood when his phone began vibrating nonstop in the backseat. He glanced at the screen, snorted, and then showed me. It was his mother calling insistently. The name flashed like a red alarm. With each ignored call, the ringing seemed to echo inside the car, heightening the tension once again. Suddenly, he leaned forward and said, almost laughing, but with a touch of desperation, "Speed up, like we're in a real chase." I couldn't help but burst out laughing. The scene was too absurd. A man in an expensive suit, fleeing a dinner party, telling me to step on the gas as if we were in an action movie. At that moment, I realized the race had reached its comedic peak. All the tension, all the mystery, had been transformed into something as human as it was ridiculous. An escape from a prearranged dinner. And look, if this story already seemed surreal to you, imagine experiencing it firsthand. And that's where I want to know, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have accepted the $500 without thinking twice? Or would you have gotten suspicious and canceled the ride? Leave a comment, because I'm sure everyone will have a different opinion. Oh, and if you enjoyed following this crazy story so far, be sure to like it, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss the next races full of surprises I'll share here. In the end, everything ended well. He thanked me, paid exactly what he had promised, and got out of the car with a smile of relief, like someone who had escaped the biggest prison of his life, even if it was just a family dinner. Thanks for watching, and see you at the next race.